Okay. I apologize for what I said. It was racist. But consider it was racist. I wasn't lying to inconvenience real-life people to get political gain. I didn't want, I'm not lying. I genuinely believed you weren't people. And that sounds bad. Okay. No, okay. I get that. I get that response. But, I genuinely thought you I genuinely thought it. Oh, no, look out. Oh, God, no, please. Oh, okay. No.
Yep, that's me. You're probably wondering how I found myself in this wacky situation. It's not a half-bad story. Tale of righteous progress, pursuit of reliable knowledge, uncomfortable historic truths, and people shitting their pants. What fools! I couldn't even imagine. Welcome to AJG's Video Game Video Essay channel. Today's topic and title, Allegory versus Taboo. Or, how to actually just shit yourself. Part 1, Shitting My Very Own Pants. With 4, I believe, binary genes on hair color, 16 on the eyes, and 400 on skin color, I honestly have a harder time making sense of a Minecraft seed. Either way, spawn doesn't really matter. If you want a beach house and spawn in the desert, improvise, adapt, overcome. There's no such thing as a desert seed. It's supposed to be random enough to be unpredictable, while keeping things consistent enough to hold on to some semblance of design. Taxonomy is fun, but it always ends up falling apart when you find out that yogurts, dolphins, and Resident Evil are solids, mammals, and horror games somehow, respectively. We only use groupings so that we can dumb things down for the schmucks. Unfortunately, there are a lot of schmucks out there, and they don't know how to feel about race stuff. On one hand, it ain't real, but on the other, it's harmful to ignore the historic oopsies that we've made in the past. Part 2, Taboo. The first way to tackle sketchy issues in fiction is to get creative and develop a bunch of metaphors and magic technicalities that obfuscate the issue where a discombobulated viewer might side with a metaphor for something they're against. The other is to talk politics like a normal fucking human being. It risks showing your ass, but if there's a moral to the story, or even a character with an opinion, then there's a policy in there. The quickest route is the most direct. Writers can fumble and audiences have prejudices, but even if it's a bad take, the piranhas will unite against it. Win-win. You may have noticed I never mentioned race there, which I imagine is going to be the pants shittiest. Stupidity, fallacy, and ignorance are all unkillable natural states of being that the collective will fight perpetually, but commenting on that has become derivative and stale. We all know that race isn't determinant of anything meaningful. There's culture and a clash of cultures, but that's just proximity plus power. This brings us back to the fantastical depictions of metaphorical, hypothetical magic, not real, alien races. Usually this sets up a racism bad narrative, or it could just be a way for the audience to see sides out on the battlefield. But neither of these are particularly good. Plainly, most of these are actually quite shite. Firstly, racism bad because race not determinant. So it's hard to deliver that message when your status screen says you can breathe underwater because you're black. The best you get is resistance to sunburn, so I hear. If Wolverine became a self-healing, invulnerable immortal after one generation of random mutation, then yeah, humans should look into the X gene. I get that people shouldn't be assholes, but the government would need sentinels for that same reason. The allegory for race doesn't track as a metaphor of race, but the story is genuinely more interesting than it would have been if it hadn't shat its pants. Anybody with any culture has known for decades that it is what you do with the gift of life that determines who you are. Not just because race doesn't matter, but because even if there were an objective genetic advantage at play, that has no bearing on what it means to be good to other people. Evolution is radical, but mixing it with culture is inherently uninteresting, fictional, or otherwise. Human race doesn't exist, but that never stopped our poor perception before. That means if it exists in the brain, it exists in the text. In the context of an allegory, a decipherable message that can only be interpreted as a dog whistle, the existence of goblins is concerning. Nobody wants to read into it, but somebody ought to be really offended. Unless, of course, this isn't a metaphor. If one of these days the robots actually ascend, the aliens actually descend, and we realize we are actually built differently, then these messages could actually come in handy. It doesn't matter whether or not we were ever created equal. Social equity will always be something to strive for, and equality would just be the equivalent of colorblindness, indifference to quote-unquote racial injustice. The points race isn't real and colorblindness bad seem contradictory, but here's some data I made up with my brain to communicate that racism doesn't make slavery bad. These graphs represent two hypothetical societies. Both use exploitation justified through racial pseudoscience in the past, but have corrected themselves in different ways. One reformed by integrating the oppressed into the system, while the other economically reformed without altering the pecking order. As you can see, the distinction is between classless racism and raceless classism. The horizontal lines represent the economic extremes. There's poverty, which means reliance on charity and often abuse, but then there's also glut. That just means your excess limits another's ability to acquire a finite resource. People above this line are the last in a game of Monopoly that's run out of hotel pieces to put down. The point of all this being, even though the society has successfully oppressed people by race, the people of that race are doing substantially better than the other respective lower class. Therefore, it would make more sense to strive for economic equity, or at least an abolishment of poverty and glut, prior to racial equity/abolishment. Now, obviously that's a false dichotomy. We can do both with no downsides, but that's not the point. The slavery was already bad. The racism was just an excuse. Part 3. Are hot topics deep? Turns out we make stuff taboo because it's frustrating to talk about. It's not that these issues are waiting for someone profound enough to articulate them, it's that there are too many vacuous automata roaming around to make it through a point worth making. There's a utility to it. It doesn't help anyone suffering from, or inconvenience anybody behind, what we consider our most heinous issues, but it keeps the vibe in the groove. I know this stuff is uncomf, but it was never particularly complex. Posers write about it because they think they're hot shit. I'm writing about it because I think they're dog shit. We are not this thing. In universe, it's fine that Naui is a 6,900-year-old DTF power dragon that just looks like that. The problem is that this is a non-fictional man's hypothetical. What motivated you to write this non-fictional, post-pubescent human man? This doesn't read as Reverse Shazam. If this is actually a commentary on a taboo, do not obfuscate the comment. The audience must assume the worst, and the author is always deft of. Summing it all up, society killed race long ago. We just never caught on because it was prehistoric. Taboo is better tackled directly, obviously, but metaphors can slip past prejudices for what it's worth. We've killed all the Neanderthals. That's not a euphemism. But if we ever run into any elves, not a euphemism, we shouldn't ditch our values just because of some genetic cuckoldry. Politics as a taboo makes sense until you realize we're supposed to communicate our ideas. This is a video game video essay channel that addresses some other fiction, but I have made some tangential political points. Mainly, I think, as a society, we should abolish classism, racism, scarcity, death, roughly in that order. I feel like those priorities are the most achievable, even if they are big picture. But what do I know? I don't even understand Darwin. Hello, please be seated. As I'm sure you're all aware, there's been some footage of me and a member of the Goblin community going around on social media in which we are engaged in an altercation.
I ain't above throwing hands with a gobbo!
After reflecting upon my actions, I've come to the conclusion that an apology is necessary for the healing process to begin. So I would like to address your racial group. I've always envied your racial group's goblin-esque aesthetic and goblin-esque qualities. In that moment of passion and anger, I was unable to maintain a professional atmosphere and let my own insecurities slip. Going forwards, I hope we can all become a bit more goblin-esque. So on behalf of my racial group, your racial group, and real-life actual goblins everywhere, I just want to say,